And I am, at this point, an avid racing sailor. I was not always. I was junior sailing dropout, and here we are teaching sailing. So, with that being said, there were quite a few years of racing experience on big boats and dinghies. In the interim there, I came back to racing after about 20 years of hiding from it anywhere I could possibly burrow myself. And so I've raced at this point all around the world. I've done Thailand, I've done the Caribbean, and maybe going to France later this year. So it's become a really happy addiction, and I hope that it develops into a happy addiction for you. It can redevelop into a happy addiction for you guys. So hopefully we will get that started again. And I guess we'll just wait a minute to see if Bill is going to join us. So I know you two have raced before. Have you guys done any racing before? No? You did the Commodore's Cup with me.
But also with Jan.
Oh, right, yeah, so you did that with Jan as well. Okay, cool. So, yeah, this will be, some of this stuff for those of you who have raced before, this will be a little bit of a repeat and you'll know it. And for those who haven't done it before, I'm going to try to keep this as plain English as humanly possible. So.
Well, for what it's worth, I've raced before, but, pull this, turn that.
Yeah.
What halyard abaft the solid shroud.
Rest.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's all right. He knows what he's doing anyway, so it's all good. Okay, so I figured that to start this off, it would probably be easiest to just start with an overview of some of the positions that we're going to assign on the boat. Typically, when you're racing anything other than a dinghy, you have a specialized set of positions where each person in the boat is going to be doing something a little different. So in this case, super easy one is the skipper, who's going to be driving the boat. Skipper's job is obviously to drive, but also to be aware of the course around them as you're going up and down the course and be trying to position yourself in the most advantageous location possible. If you happen to be lucky enough to have a separate tactician, they'll help you do that. But in this case, I think we're just going to have the skipper on that particular task. Next, moving up the boat, we have trimmers. So we would have a main trimmer here with the main sheet. And that person will obviously be responsible for controlling the main around the course. And we'll also have a jib trimmer who will be responsible for the jib. And they will also be responsible for the spinnaker. When we set the spinnaker up, you will be in charge of trimming that sail. And then we'll have a bow person, pit person over here. So the pit person is on a bigger boat, typically a separate person who is in charge of all of the halyards. So if anything is going vertically up or down, it's usually the pit person who's in charge of that. And the pit is the console of all the different halyards and clutches that you find along the front of the boat there. The bow person handles, when we're doing the spinnaker sets and douses, they're going to be putting up the pole, they're going to be taking down the kite and actually gathering it as we go around leeward marks, and I will go through a whole idea of each mark rounding and what happens in depth for each position. One thing that's going to be a little bit wonky about these boats is since we're sailing with only 3 or 4, it's probable that the pit duties are going to get divided up between 2 people, because at some point the bow person's going to be fiddling with the pole, somebody else is going to have to be doing the halyards. So we'll test that out on practice day, but in general your positions are bow, pit, your trimmers, and your driver. So with that in mind, we'll go through a little bit about what the course is going to look like. So race courses can come in various different formats. Oh, I see this is going to need cleaner. This is like not the newest whiteboard on the planet. Let's make that tissue box, would you? Just toss it on up here. Okay, there we go. Now that made a mess of everything. So, race course. We have
sample, give us any thoughts about how many people are going to want to vote?
I don't know exactly how many they're going to go with. I think that will depend on how many subscribers they have and how experienced they are and stuff like that. But I figure it's either going to be 3 or 4 for them as well. They could do it with as few as 2, but that would get hairy on the Spinnaker set, so who knows. Okay, so anatomy of the race course. We have a starting line, which is defined by a committee boat and a pin, and the pin is usually quite literally a flag on a stick that marks the end of the starting line. There's a windward mark up here and a leeward mark down here. And basically every race course will have a starting sequence followed by an upwind leg, a downwind leg. You may do that twice around, and then you go back through the finish. So the start of the race is, in this particular case, this will vary if you're doing bigger boats, it'll be a longer starting sequence. But in this case, what they do is a 2-minute starting sequence. It's the same thing that we usually do with dinghies and small boats. So what will happen is at 2 minutes, they will give you a series of horn blasts to let you know that your first warning is coming up. And so you'll hear horn, 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 and then there's a short pause, and then there's 2 long blasts. So you get 2 long horn blasts. That lets you know that you have 2 minutes until you can cross the line. From there, the race committee will sound at 1.5 minutes, 1 long and 1 short horn sound. And then you know that you have 1:30. This could also be done technically with 1 long and 3 short, but typically it's 1 long, 1 short. At 1 minute, you get 1 long horn blast. 30 seconds, you get 3 short horn blasts. At 20 seconds, 2 short horns. At 10, you get 1 short horn, and then you get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1 short horn for each of those. So you have 2 minutes, and if you forgot your watch, the good news is the race committee is going to tell you how much time is left anyway. Typically when we are frostbite racing, we don't really have time to look at our watches anyway, so we just go by the horns that we're getting off of the committee boat. But basically, once you have your 2-minute sequence going, you're going to want to start positioning yourself in the starting sequence. So what happens during the start is that basically all the boats are down here underneath the starting line somewhere, and they will start kind of reaching back and forth. Usually when they set up these courses, the wind is coming directly down the course, preferably square with the starting line. So as you are in the pre-start sequence, you're just going along the line, and you're going to jibe around and go back over here, and then you're going to tack and go back, and you basically are making these sausages while you're killing time before the starting line. Now during that time, you want to be deciding where it is that you'd like to start on the starting line. The way that you determine that is that it may be that there's a lot more wind on this side of the course, and so if you sail over here, you're going to sail into a dead spot, you don't want it, and if you don't want that, chances are that you want to start over here, closer to the mark boat, because that way you can just kind of head right off over here and get to that wind, right? It could be also, sometimes there's either a shift or the race committee has done a really poor job of setting the starting line, and you end up with this very skewed starting line. This side is way closer to the mark than this side, so you would want to start down this side of the course. So typically in the pre-start, you'll be wanting to look around for these things. Is there a side of the course that has better breeze? Is there a skew to the line where you might want to be closer to the boat or closer to the pin? So you'll have your head out of the boat during the starting sequence, trying to look for that stuff as best as possible. And one other thing to consider when you're deciding where it is that you want to start is that sometimes if there's a favored end of the line, let's say that the line is very skewed, all the boats are going to want that line. If you don't feel comfortable starting in a giant pack of boats, you may want to just get a clear start away from everybody else. You know that you're going to be a little ways behind them, but at least you have clear air, you haven't had a collision, nothing's a mess. Sometimes that's actually the best start to have. So consider that as you are going around in your starting sequence. So during the start sequence, you have these 2 minutes where you're kind of just doing reconnaissance and reaching back and forth along the line. As you're coming into typically about the last 30 seconds of this sequence, you pretty much want to be more or less in position on the starting line. So what you'll be doing is kind of going slowly along here, and let's say that you've decided that you really like the breeze on the left over here, and you think it looks good over here. So you'll kind of have moseyed yourself over this way and be more or less setting up to get ready to go. The smaller the boat, the more likely it is that you're just going to sit head to wind right in the spot that you want to be with the sails luffing, and you're just parked there. It's a good place to be. During that time, other people will try to mess you up, especially if they want your spot. So they may come underneath you and try to bump you out of your position or something like that. And we will go over later in this presentation what the rules are so that you know whether you have rights on that person or they have rights on you, and that will determine whether you have to move or if you can keep your spot or if you can move them someplace else. But basically, you'll want to be here at about 30 seconds, find your spot more or less, within somewhere between 30 and 10. By the time you hit 5 seconds, that's the time when you want to hit the gas pedal. So basically, you're going to turn the boat slightly down to get some power going. So you'll go from your luffing position, you'll turn the boat down a little ways, trim your sails in, and then you're going to start trucking, and ideally at exactly 0, you'll be crossing the starting line. Now, if for some reason, when you cross the starting line, you have done so before the final gun has gone off, you have to exonerate yourself. The way to do that is to cross the line again, and then start again. So basically what you have to do is, let's say that you've come over the line early, the race committee will sound a horn and yell out your sail number to let you know that it was you. You will turn down, cross the starting line again. If you can get back up, just start again. If you can't, you can just jibe around down here and start the other way. But you must get the entire boat back below the line before you can restart. And that's how you clear yourself. So, with that, you find yourself on the upwind leg. And so, one more thing about the starting line. If you find yourself over here, let's say that you wanted the mark boat end, and somebody else is already here and there's no room for you to squeeze in between this other boat and the committee boat, don't try to stick yourself in there. Very not okay. You will end up causing a lot of protests and problems. So if you can't get in there, just, oh yeah, the committee boat owners hate this. So don't run into the committee boat, don't hit the guy who's below you. We'll go over that in the rules a little bit later. Some notes for people who are going to be crewing as opposed to driving. Some helpful things that you can do in the starting sequence. So if you are, especially if you are the person in the bow position, let your skipper know how many boat lengths you have until you cross the line. So if I'm using these very small boats, if I'm 3 boat lengths down, I'll say 3 boat lengths, 2 boat lengths, 1 boat length on the line, and then that way your skipper knows if they have any wiggle room, if they need to come down because they're going to be over the line. So whoever's in that front position should be trying to keep an eye on where the starting line is and just practice guesstimating how many 18 feet spaces you think there are between you and the line. If somebody can, even though the horns are going, if somebody can call out the time, that's always helpful. So sometimes the skipper is so far into their own head, and I do this to myself in match racing all the time, that I have no idea what time it is. There may be horns going off, it may be obvious to other people, I have no idea where I am in the space-time continuum, and I have somebody telling me every 10 to 15 seconds where I am, and then at the end they're giving me a countdown for like the last 20 seconds consecutively. So if somebody does happen to remember their watch that day, it's super helpful if you can call out the time every 10 to 15 seconds. If not, as the horns go off, just vocalize which horn that was. That was a minute 30, that's a minute. Definitely very helpful. And then The other thing is don't assume that your skipper sees every boat that's coming at you, especially as you're doing these sausage things. Sometimes you don't see something below a sail. Feel free to call out traffic. If you see that there's a boat coming, especially if you're on port tack, tell your skipper, hey, do you have number 12 over here? Or hey, there's a boat down here to leeward. Helps prevent crashes. You can't always rely that the other person has seen it, so it is helpful to call traffic, time, and distance. So those three things are very useful in the pre-start. So from there, going around the course, they have set the course up with the wind square to the starting line. Yes?
On the start, if your boat is just touching the line at 1 second too early, is that a violation? Or does the whole boat have to be over the line at the start?
Just the tip of the boat needs to go over the line. Yeah. So basically, even if it's just the very tip of your bow that's over the line, they'll call you over.
You get called, okay.
And they do have somebody on the committee boat that's sighting down the line to look for that specifically. So especially as you are doing this for the first few times, it's okay to not be too aggressive with it. That being said, it is a common known thing among skippers that if you don't get called over early every once in a while, you're not trying hard enough. So it happens, and it's okay when it does happen. You just go back and clear yourself. So, any other questions before I go to the upwind line? I know this is like a barrage of information. So. Okay, so going around the course, next up we have the windward leg. So we've crossed the starting line. We're on our way up to the windward mark. The reason why the course is set up so that the starting line is directly perpendicular to the wind is in order to force you to tack. It means that you can't just sail to the next mark. You're going to have to tack and jibe up and down the course, and this keeps it interesting. So as you're going up the course, you're going to be trying to find, again, you'll pick whichever side you think has better wind and try to stick to that side if you can. So you'll assume the wind is heavier looking over here. You're going to sail out to this side, and then eventually you'll head back towards the windward mark. Now, what I don't suggest is going all the way out here to the corner and then turning for the windward mark. That is what's known as banging the corner, and the rule in sailing is you just don't do it. Why? Because while you are sailing out here, if the wind decides to shift, and all of a sudden you're getting knocked off this way, now you have much more distance to sail back here. If you stay a little closer to the center, but still on your favorite side, no matter what the wind does, you're not going to find yourself all the way out here and really struggling to get back. So ideally, you'll probably tack a few times on the way up the course. And again, in the beginning, your skipper, your tactician will help you to figure out how best to do that. And to that end, one of the things that you can do to help your skipper as you are sailing is to watch and see what the wind is doing. So typically we ask for the crew to call puffs. So as you're looking along the water, if you see a darker patch that's a puff of wind, you probably want to be in it. So you can, either point out where it is, or if you're going to hit it soon, it really helps your main trimmer to know when it's coming. Keeping the boat flat is fast, and so if you tell your main trimmer there's a puff in 2, 1, when the puff hits, they're already ready to go to ease the main so that you're not completely over on your ear and everything is falling apart. So it really helps to call those puffs, let them know what the timing is going to be, and if you are in a position where you don't have much to do, especially if you're that forward position in the bow and maybe there's not much going on, watch the wind on the water and see what you can figure out. The other thing that you can do, if you can manage to do this, is to call shifts. Now, there are 2 ways to see a wind shift on the water. One way to do it is that you can watch if there are boats ahead of you on the course. You can see if this other boat is ahead of you and they're sailing along and suddenly they're sailing like this, you know that they probably just got into a knock. The wind just shifted and pushed them down that way. Or if suddenly they're sailing much closer to the mark, they're in a lift. And so you can feed that back to your driver to let them know, the next puff is going to be a knock, the next puff is going to be a lift. And so, if you happen to notice that, it's helpful to feed back. The other way to do this is that some people can actually just look at the puff on the water and see the direction of the ripples and know if it's a puff, if it's a knock or a lift. I can't do it. As far as I'm concerned, it's unicorn magic. I have never been able to see it. Your mileage may vary. So, just some thoughts for the upwind.
Yeah, I never had a boat in front of me, so that's.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you don't have a boat in front of you,
Yeah,
but if
I'm
you do,
almost-
use them to your advantage because they'll let you know what's coming next.
It's hard being you, Frank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's just-
something I have to look with.
So, next up, we're going to go around the Windward Mark. So, Windward Mark rounding, yes.
Are there boundaries on the sides or no?
Nope, you can sail pretty much wherever you
Wherever you want,
want,
you can
unless
go,
it's the
yeah.
America's Cup with a spectator fleet, you can go wherever you'd like, so.
Right.
But who knows, I've heard tell that the adult sailing group may send out Thursday night spectator boats, so who knows, maybe it will be. If there are spectator boats, don't hit them.
Another question, what is the distance north to south on the marks?
So it will depend on the day. If it's a light wind day, they'll set them pretty close together. If it's a windy day where you can go faster and cover more distance, they'll set them a little further apart.
Any estimate of,
I would say for these, they probably, for the ideals, you're probably going to get a course that's around like a 1/4 mile per leg or something like that. If you're in the big boat regattas, it's usually 1 to 1.5, depending on the breeze, sometimes 2 if it's really, really windy. But for these smaller boats, probably about a 1/4 mile, I would have to figure each leg. So, any other questions?
Now, you think they're only gonna do windward lewards? They're not gonna be any jog marks or anything?
Yeah, we'll only be windward leeward. So I looked at the sailing instructions, and they are using the same sailing instructions from Frostbite Fleet. So your options are that you could go, there's a once around where you start, go around the windward mark, and finish. There's a, I guess it's kind of like a half around. There's a once around where you go up to the windward mark, go back down, do a leeward mark, and finish going upwind. Or there's a twice around, which is up, you do 1 full sausage, and then another sausage, and finish upwind. So those are your course options. And my experience with Centerport's race committee is that if it's not windy, they will only give you once around. If there is breeze, they'll probably give you twice around. The nice thing about a twice around course is that if you've had a mishap somewhere, it gives you a lot more time to like claw back, whatever it is that went wrong somewhere on the course. So it's nice to have that option, but it'll depend on the wind strength.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they used to use the pin as a leeward mark. Are they going to set a leeward mark?
Yeah, it will be an
Separate
actual
from-
separate leeward mark. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you'll
can we
have
draw that?
yeah. So basically, I'm gonna take these magnets off for a moment. Let's move this whole course up into a more realistic format here. So basically, what you'll end up having is usually they'll use these inflatable tetrahedron marks. They're like these triangles. So, a windward and a leeward mark. And a committee vote. So, rough approximation, basically, as you go to do this course, you will do your sausages around here until you decide that you're going to start. You'll tack your way upwind, around the mark, jibe your way downwind, around the mark, and you'll either finish or go for another lap. So that's basically how the courses are going to work. You may do 2 laps of that, and you may do 1 lap of it. Sometimes if it's really light, they'll only send you for half. You'll just go up and down. So, and I will send you guys, I was able to finally get my hands on the sailing instructions, so Centerport put them behind a password-protected firewall on their website, and being not a member there, I had to call some friends over there to get them. I finally got them, and I will send them to everybody to read. But that contains the courses and all the instructions about what the start sequence is going to sound like and things like that. So all that is written in the sailing instructions. I just couldn't get a hold of it until earlier today. So apologies for the late distribution.
Yeah, right.
And it has happened. We had one where we one of the clubs on Connecticut were using the same mark we were using, but in the opposite direction. Talk about screaming and yelling and excitement.
Chaos. Okay, so Windward Mark, good point on the rounding to port. Now, as you come up here, you're going to have to change sails. So when we get to the top mark, you're going to be sailing with your jib and your main. And when you come up to the Windward Mark, you need your downwind sail, which is your spinnaker. So what will happen is a whole series of crew work, and I will go through these. It's going to sound like gibberish, and then we'll go out and practice it, and it will make sense. So basically, have you guys all put up a symmetrical spinnaker before? No? Okay. So basically the deal is, let's draw a boat. So you've got your main, and you've got a jib. So as you are coming up to the mark, and I'm going to do an overhead view as well because sometimes it's actually easier to see this from above. Here's your mast, and you have your jib and your main. So as you come up to the mark, every spinnaker that is a symmetrical spinnaker, which is what we have on the Ideal 18s, has a pole. The purpose of the pole is to steady the spinnaker and help hold it out in front of the boat. So the first thing that's going to happen is that the pole is going to go up on the mast. When you get out to the boat, you will realize that there is a little ring on the mast. And it's not there for holding halyards when the boat is on mooring. It's actually for putting up the pole. Now, the pole basically is an aluminum tube, and it has two hooks on either end. And these hooks have these little piston pins that are controlled by what is called a trip line on the bottom. So you can open the jaws with this trip line, and basically you just take it and pull on it, and that pulls the piston back and opens the jaw. It also has a topping lift, which is sort of like a bridle with a ring on the top, and a downhaul, which is the same thing. So it has sort of a brace of spectra on either side of it. So what's going to happen is all of this is going to get connected to various things on the boat. So first thing is that it's going to get connected onto the pole end of the mast. And somewhere on the mast, clipped to that ring, is a topping lift. And you will take the topping lift and connect it to the top ring of the bridle. And I don't know if these boats actually have a downhaul. I think they don't.
Yes, no, I do.
They do? Okay. So if they have a downhaul, that's going to be laying on the deck here somewhere. You're going to grab...
I think it goes to the same ring.
It might be on the same ring. It depends. Sometimes they... Yeah, I guess we don't have pad eyes for them, right? All right, so it'll be on the ring up here. You're going to grab that and connect it to here. And from there, you are going to take... You will have set up spinnaker sheets prior to racing. And the spinnaker sheets are just going to be... Your spinnaker is going to be in a bucket in here, smooshed around. And your spinnaker sheets are going to go around the forestay and into the boat and out here into the boat. So basically, you have two sheets on the spinnaker. The one that is to windward that's going to hold the pole is the guy. The one that you're actually going to be trimming is the sheet. Fun fact, that will change as you jive. So it could be the sheet, it could be the guy, depending on what it's doing. The guy is the one that's to windward. So, now that I've thoroughly confused you, you're going to take the guy and clip it into the outside jaw of the pole. So basically, the way that this is going to look when you hoist the pole is that you have your ring. The pole will go up perpendicular to the deck, and the way that you will hoist it the topping lift, and it'll just be pulled down to the deck on the bottom. So that's basically what your pole is going to look like, and you will have a guy running through there and sitting in the jaws. Now, hopefully this will make a little bit more sense when we discuss how the Spinnaker is actually going to look when it goes up. So,
What's happening with the jib while you're doing this?
So the jib is
the furl?
not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So, and I'll put a little sequence over here.
And can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
When are we doing this?
Tuesday.
Yeah, as we're, but
Right about there.
it's all gonna be done like this.
So when we go to do it, we are going to start it pretty early. So
I
when-
can't imagine 3 francs on one boat.
Yeah, right.
What the
I'm going to do with all of you Franks what we used to do with our dance team when we had like 3 Jennifers. There would be like, one would become Fifi, one would become Coco, one would become Diamond. So like prepare to all
Coco.
Coco it is. So, we'll rename you all so you all know what your team name is.
But that's a really tight type of maneuver.
Yeah, so here's the thing. The first few times you do it, it's going to be chaos. Eventually it becomes like, very normal, and then you can do it closer and closer and
It's
closer to the
always
mark.
chaos. It's never normal.
When it's done right, it is poetry.
Yes.
It's, yeah. And it will get there eventually. And again, trying to tell you guys this without being able to show you this by actually doing it, it sounds like a bunch of gibberish, but I swear it will make sense when we go out on the water and actually
Well,
try
it makes
it.
sense. It's just scary.
Yeah, it's not actually that. It's just a lot of terminology.
The guy that packs the Spinnaker is always the guy that's at fault.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Good to know.
So, all right. First thing that we're doing is we're on the approach to the mark. So we're approaching the mark. We're going to put guy in full jaw. 2. We're going to connect the topping lift and downhaul. And then 3, put pull on mast ring. 4, hoist pole using topping lift. And the topping lift in these boats is very clearly marked. All of those little jam cleats that are along that pit area in the front, they are all clearly marked to say, spin halyard, topping lift, whatever. So if you find yourself in doubt in the moment as you're going to set, just check the label and make sure you got the right one. Okay, so now we have our pull up. So the next thing that's going to happen is that we are going to, so now we have our jib up, we have our main flying, and we have our pole set up here, hanging out there on the side of the boat. And we have our guy that's running through that. Whoever's trimming the Spinnaker is now going to what we call pre-feed the guy, which means that they're going to start pulling it. And what that will do is pull the corner of the Spinnaker out of the bag and get it set up to fly on the side of the boat. The Spinnaker is also hooked up to a Spinnaker halyard, which will be running down the mast there. And so once we have pre-fed the guy, so basically what that will look like is the person who's on the guy is going to be pulling it, the kite's going to come out, and you'll see the corner of it hit the pole, and you'll know that you have made that particular part of the kite ready to go. Once that happens, the person who's in the pit is going to start hoisting, and this happens, so you are going to hoist like right about this area is your general hoisting area. As you're turning the boat down, that's where you're going to be doing your hoist. So typically your skipper will call hoist right as the side of your boat is passing the mark. So we'll call this at the mark. We feed the guy. 2 is we hoist the spinnaker. And so that is now going to go all the way up to the top of the mast. And if you're the pit person, you're like pulling on this as hard as you can to get this to go up to the top as quickly as you can.
Be careful.
Once it's up to,
I've torn.
yeah, if it stops while you're doing this, if you feel
Stop.
resistance, stop pulling.
Yeah, they have no
Means it's
strength.
stuck on something and it will tear. Up to the top of the mast. Once it hits the top of the mast, you can, whoever is doing that, it helps to yell made so that people know that it's hit the top. And once that happens, your trimmer is going to take the sheet and start to trim it in order to get the kite flying. So what this will look like in the end is that on the leeward side of the boat, you'll have this Spinnaker up that I hope is pretty. I haven't seen them, but let's hope that they're all pretty colors. So now you have your Spinnaker up, attached to the pole, being trimmed into the boat. And so the setup here is that it will basically look like that from up top. It's now at the top of the mast, it's flying, so you still have your jib out. You want to get rid of your jib because it's blocking the airflow onto the Spinnaker, so whoever is probably doing pit or bow will be in charge of furling the jib.
They still have roll furling now.
Yes,
Yep.
What's that?
they roll from.
Yeah, but they're also self-tacking, right?
Yeah, there's
But the jib, at this point, you have to furl it. So-
Yeah, no, you have to furl it, but earlier you had said somebody would be responsible for tacking.
So it
You
will
can adjust
go side to side on its own,
Right.
but the shape of the sail is up to you to control.
Ah, I didn't learn that.
Yep, we'll go over
I
that
thought
when
that-
we're out on the boats.
Yeah, I just thought that was automatic.
No,
No, yeah, no,
Hence,
so you-
hence self-tacking.
yeah, I mean, it sort of does. It's so the self-tacking refers to, it's on that little traveler that goes back and forth.
Yeah.
So technically you could leave it just kind of clipped in on both sides and it will
Right.
move itself back and forth. If you want to maximize its efficiency, which is important in racing, then you're going to want to change the shape of it depending which direction you're going and how close to the wind you are. And so we will go over that when we go out to do practice evening on the boats.
For the next year or so.
Yeah, exactly. So I know for your next lifetime, like I am still learning things about trim. It's one of the great things about sailing though, that no matter how much you learn, there's always something else you can learn from someone else. I have a guy on my team who is a professional racing sailor and has been for his entire life. And he is one of the most skilled human beings I've ever had the privilege to sail with. And he still will come back from races and be like, man, I sailed with this guy and like I've never seen anybody do this thing on the boat before, but he was doing this and oh my God, like we picked up a knot of speed just from him doing. So you're always learning no matter how good you are. It's sort of like golf. There's always something else you can improve on. Except that I can't manage to coordinate my eyes and hands with any balls, which is why I sail and don't play golf. So, with that in mind, we have now furled the jib, and could you just open, I think Shelly might be here. She was gonna.
Sorry, I'm late.
yeah,
Hi, come on
I'm
in.
so sorry. I'm just
No worries.
life gets in the way.
It does sometimes.
So now that you have arrived and seen this complete mess on the board, basically what we're talking about, we went through the start sequence a little bit earlier, and I'm recording this, so hopefully I'll be able to post that for you to look over the first part of this. So currently we're talking about rounding the windward mark, and the theory there is that it's a sail change. So the Spinnaker is going to go up, it'll be pull first, Spinnaker, and then we're going to furl the jib for the downwind. And so ideally, if timing works out correctly, all of this will happen to about here, and as you are leaving the mark, you will have fully changed your sails. The first few
In about
times we
10
do it,
seconds.
it probably won't happen that way, and that's okay, but we'll work on that and we'll get better at it. So, with that said, we are now on the downwind leg. And so I'm going to change this part out a little bit. Let's clean up our trajectory here a little bit. All right, so on the downwind leg, it's going to be much the same idea as the upwind leg in the sense that, again, given the direction of the wind, you can't sail straight down the course. You'll probably jibe a few times in the process. And the same idea applies that you probably don't want to go all the way out here on a winger just in case the wind shifts and suddenly you find yourself heading this way and you can't really get there without sailing extra distance. So ideally you want to try to stay near
Can I ask you a
the
question?
course.
Can you go outside the committee boat and near the flag?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought, okay.
That's just a starting.
Yeah, so you have your starting line, and sometimes this is one thing that we'll go over before we actually race. Sometimes they'll tell you that the starting line is closed. If they say that, that means that basically as you're going around the course, you can't cross it. You have to stay away from it. Sometimes if that's the case, it's because they're starting multiple classes. I know that the Thursday nights they're doing lasers and ideal 18s. So if they have another group of boats that's starting, they'll tell you to not recross here because they're going to have another group of boats starting as you're coming down the course. So just something to keep in mind. Other than that, you can technically go wherever you want. Like if you want to stop at the Bay Club for a burger, you could. It's just not going to
But you have to finish within the pin and the window.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So the finish, you have to cross this actual
Maybe
line in
we're
order to
gonna
finish.
Start and
Burger for the committee.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, if you're gonna pick up burgers, get some for the race committee. They'll appreciate that. So, all right. So downwind leg, same thing. We're gonna be kind of jibing our way down the course, heading towards this mark, which again we will round to port. Some things to keep in mind for the downwind leg. Be careful of the boom because on the jibes you are going to be, so the mainsail will have been let all the way out, and when you go to jibe, obviously there's a concussion risk, so make sure that first of all your skipper should be very clear in communicating when a jibe is coming up by saying, okay, I want to jibe, is everybody ready to jibe? Everybody should respond ready to jibe. And once they've said that, then the skipper should call jibing, and everybody should be aware at that point and make sure that they're keeping their head down and being aware of where the boom is. For the trimmers, if you are trimming the sail, the objective here is to keep the kite full. So if you think of your, typical picture of a, boat with the spinnaker up, it's this big, beautiful triangular shape, kind of plump and everything. So that's basically what you want from it, because if it is full, then it is pushing you downwind. You have wind in it, it's full, it's propelling you forward. Now, as you are trimming, and we'll go over this on the boat for those of you who haven't trimmed a kite before, what I was taught when I started to learn how to trim spinnaker was that you are called a kite trimmer, but you're really a kite easer. So what happens is that you are constantly easing that sheet out so that you get a nice little curl in the shoulder of the sail, which is if you are sitting in the boat, this is the mast, you have the sail out in front of the boat. And this is attached to a spinnaker pole. So basically what you want to look for is this shoulder of the sail. It should be just curling a little bit. And so you as the trimmer, you're going to be constantly easing that sail to get that little curl. But if it starts to go too far and it starts to collapse over, then you're going to trim it back in. So we'll go over that whole process. But a lot of people, when they're new to this, their tendency is to trim it in a little too hard, which chokes off the airflow, and you're not going to move as fast if you're over trimmed. So it's a bit of a psychological process to get comfortable with easing more than you're pulling in, but that's actually the fastest way to trim the sails. So when you are going through a jibe, basically what's going to happen is that so as I said before, you have a guy which is attached to this side of the sail, and a sheet which is attached to that side of the sail. And so this is your windward side, this is your leeward side. The Spinnaker trimmer is going to have both of those in their hands. And basically all you're going to do is ease out the one side and pull it around to the other side. So you're basically just going to rotate it, trying to keep it as full as possible. Just ease this side, pull this side in, and rotate it around the front of the boat. While you're doing that, the person who's driving should be trying to keep the nose of the boat under the spinnaker. A nice slow turn, and that way everything stays full. So basically the idea is that as you're turning the boat, you don't want the spinnaker to just collapse into a lump. You want to keep it flying. Easier said than done. Again, we'll go over it on the water. But there's also a whole process that's going to happen in the jibe. I am probably going to talk it through in depth on the water, just because trying to explain it on a board in 2D is difficult. But what will happen is that the kite will rotate. The pole, which is on the windward side, now needs to go to the other windward side. The bow person will unclip both ends of the pole, move it across the other side, clip both sides back on, and then get back into the boat. So you will be like up towards the foredeck a little bit to move that across, or you can stand on the foredeck if that's more comfortable. But the pole has to go to the windward side of the boat always. So once you've jibed and your other side of the boat is windward, the pole goes over there. It's not as complicated as a process as it may sound, but it's just easier to learn it by doing it. So we'll go over that in detail on the water.
The pole doesn't swing on its own to the other side?
Nope.
It's clipped to the guy.
It's,
We're trying to sail inside out if you try to do that.
We used to
Yeah,
unclip it
right.
from the mast, and the person who had the sheet would sort of feed it up to the person with the pole and
Yeah.
clip it, and then, so you're
That's also
never
a good way to do it.
completely, commando out there. You've
Yeah.
always got something on the pole.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a good way to do it. If you have somebody that who already has a hand on it that can just kind of pass it up, it makes it easier for the bow person. Depending on the size of your boat, it may not be an option. On the ideals, it definitely is. So it's a good way to work with the trimmer to get that done, or if your pit person can get a hand on it. But yeah, basically you will manually detach it from the side it's on, shift it over to the other side, and put it up. And I will send you guys, there are some really good videos for this that are online, so I'll send you links to the videos that you can watch, and they'll demonstrate how it gets done, and you can kind of visually see it. It'll be easier.
On roughly the same boats?
Similar boat. It's the video that I'm thinking of, the boat's a little bit bigger, but it's the same setup. So
Okay, cool.
same setup, slightly larger scale.
Besides, Frank, the boom would not pass the jib. So if you try to swing it from leaving it on,
yes.
it's going to hit the jib and stop.
So you gotta slide.
Just go side to side.
And so it has clips on both ends.
Yes.
The whole
So that's sort of the trick, where we're gonna feed it between.
Yeah. So you'll use the trip wire on the bottom to open those jaws,
Right.
and then just pull it down a little bit, move it to the side, and clip it right back on. So
Flip
you
it on
get
the
the
opposite end
new
of
guy.
this pole.
Right.
Yep. So you'll be on the other side,
You're
new guy in
ducking
the
at
jaw.
the same time. This is when the
I've never
pole
seen
is.
it done.
It's a little
It's
bit
exciting.
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a ballet, but when it works right, it's a thing of beauty. Okay, so making it down the course to the leeward mark. So we're going to be rounding again to port, and we will have to change the sails again because you can't go upwind with the spinnaker. So now the spinnaker has to come down. This is where your bow person really comes in. So what will happen is that the first thing that you're going to do, so as you are approaching the mark, you are going to, assuming that the pole is in an advantageous position to do this, the jib will come out first, typically, and we'll practice it that way first because it's so much easier. So the jib will come out first. The second thing that will happen is typically, so it depends on, we'll go through this because if you are coming in depending on which tack you're coming in on. So if you are on a port jibe, this is a fairly easy thing. Your pole is over here. You know, you can roll out your jib on this side. If you're coming in this direction, it's a little bit harder. So you're in this case, the pole has to come out first because you can't maneuver with the pole on the side that you're. So we'll work on all this. You know, I'm going to give you a general here, but we'll work on all the variations when we go out to do boat practice. So jib out. Depending on where you're set up, either the next thing will be that you take the pole out, or it could be that the kite comes down on the halyard. So these are interchangeable depending on your approach, and like I said, we'll go over it on the water. But basically, yeah.
Do you have my only experience in this kind of thing was like little boats where you had a bucket that you douse it into. Is it a bag or what?
That's a
That's a
bucket.
bucket.
Oh, you have a
That's a
bucket?
bucket.
Okay,
It's
good. I'll
just
do
the
it
same.
right
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, yeah, so there's a bucket that is going to be sitting there at the base of the mast. And what's going to happen is the bow person is going to reach out, grab the foot of the sail. Your pit person or whoever's going to be on the halyard, it might be the bow person themselves. If it's right there, they could just pop the halyard and feed it. You're going to start grabbing, if you're the bow person, you're grabbing the foot of the sail, gathering it in. The halyard is coming down at the same time, and you start pulling everything in and just stuffing it down into this bucket. Once it's all down, then you need to take your pole off. If it's not off already, it might be, it might not be. Pole needs to come down, and once everything is down, then you can round the mark, because obviously the first thing that you did was take your jib out, so you have your head sail to go up with. If you're ever confused about the order in which you're doing things as it comes to setting the spinnaker, dousing the spinnaker, furling the jib, unfurling the jib, you always want to make sure that you have a head sail flying. So if you don't have a jib open, you can't pull the kite down yet. You always want to make sure you have some head sail going so that you don't have nothing up there and just an empty foredeck. So again, when we go out on the water, we'll discuss the variations of how one gets the kite down, because it's different if you're coming in on port or starboard jibe. But the thing to know is that your jib is going to come out first, your pole will come down, or your kite will come down in some succession or another, and once it's all in and under the deck, you start heading upwind.
You reach up to the foot, you reach under the jib and up to the implement.
Yeah, these ones, I think the jib is small enough that you can probably just reach out, and the jib is ahead of the mast anyway, so it's not going to be in your face, which is helpful. So last thing is the finish. Basically, the only thing to know there is that as you cross the line, the race committee will sound, probably in this case, a whistle. Sometimes it's a horn. But as you cross the finish line, you want to listen for that. And that is how you will know that you have made it all the way across the line, and then you can start cleaning up after the race. You want to keep racing until you hear it, because if the race committee hasn't finished you yet, you want to make sure that you're still in competition mode. The other thing to keep in mind is that once you have finished the race, you want to clear the starting area, finishing area, and get out of there, because if there are other boats behind you, and ideally they're all behind you, they need room to finish. So once you finish your race, you're going to come over here and clear out of the finish line area. So with that said, I'm sure there are probably a million questions, because it's a little vague without the on-water practice in terms of the sequence, but are there any questions before I move on to rules? Okay. I promise this will not be as complicated as it sounds when we actually get up there. All right. So, where'd my little red boat thing go? Did I lose it?
It's up near
Oh, here it is. Okay. Cool. So, racing rules. At some point or another, in any race, you are going to end up encountering another boat somewhere on the race course. The thing to remember is that whenever two boats meet on the race course, one of them is a right-of-way boat and one of them is a keep clear boat. There is a rule called Rule 14. Rule 14 says avoid contact. So,
Can I be right away, boat?
You can be right of way boat if you're on starboard, etc. We'll go over
Okay,
how you
there's
establish
rules.
yourself. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
rules to this. So, okay.
I thought you could just claim
So, alright, so we have right of way boat and keep clear boat. So, first thing we have is a port starboard. I think you guys all know the answer to this one. The right of way boat is the boat on starboard. And the keep clear boat is the boat on port. And so for those of you who either ordered the racing rules or printed it out from online, this is all in here. It's in part 2, when boats meet. And you can find all these rules in here and review them. They're actually written surprisingly clearly for a sport that relies on a lot of weird terms and gibberish. So you can check that out. I sent out links to that. If you do go to print this out, and we had this discussion earlier, if you go to print the entire file, it's like 200 something pages. You don't need to print out all the appendices for like windsurfing and stuff like that. Just print the first 64 pages as like the actual racing rules that apply to sailing. So you can skip all the rest of it. Okay, so.
it. You send out that second link because that was the.
Yeah, I'll send that around. Okay, and that is, in case you want to go look it up later, that's rule 10. All right, so the next thing that happens is, and this one is going to be important when you're on the starting line. So let's draw a little starting line here. Here's our committee boat. So the next rule is windward boat and leeward boat. So what happens, and again, your wind is coming from here, heading down this way. As you're coming along here, if you're the blue boat, you want to come in here and start right here. But this red boat would also like to start there. So they'll come below you, come up underneath you, and start yelling at you to head up. And you have to go all the way as far as head to wind in order so that they can go in there and steal your spot. Why is that? Because when there is a question as between a windward boat and a leeward boat, the right-of-way boat is the leeward boat, and the keep clear boat is the windward boat. So again, with the wind coming down this way, this guy's windward, this guy's leeward, he's closer to the wind, he's farther away from the wind. This guy down here has rights, and he can push you all the way up to head to wind if he wants to. This obviously applies when the boats are overlapped. Overlap is defined as whether or not, based on an imaginary line off the front boat's stern, has this boat crossed that line or not. So this boat in this position would not be overlapped, but if it were down there, he's through that line, he's overlapped. So if you have some part of your boat that is over a line across an imaginary line across the stern of the other boat, you have an overlap.
So in that scenario, if in your blue boats that's on the magnet there, if that boat is able to maintain that boat behind him is maintaining the distance between them, that boat can push the leeward boat right out. Right?
No, the
Then it
leeward boat can
stays-
push the windward boat.
But when, yeah.
No, but if you said that.
Oh, you mean, so if
you said that's yeah, exactly.
that guy's
It's like
clear.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this, by the way, is rule 11. Okay, so what you are talking about is rule 12. And that is when a boat is clear ahead and clear astern.
Oh, okay.
And in that case, clear ahead has right away, and clear astern is keep clear, and that is because typically most people in a boat are facing forward, and so it's on the guy behind them who can actually see the forward boat to keep clear of that guy, as opposed to expecting the people in the boat that's ahead to have eyes in the back of their head to see what the guy behind them is doing. So with that in mind, the popular way to acquire rights is to be behind. I have no rights back here. If I can speed up and get under you, I establish rights.
Gotta give way then, right?
So that happens a lot at the start. So that is something that when you're in the starting sequence, you always have to be aware of. If there is, you know, and you'll see it out of the corner of your eye as you're going along, there's somebody behind you. The first race that I ever drove in was a women's skippers race in City Island, and I wasn't really paying attention to the back corner of the boat to see what was going on there. And there was another larger, faster boat that was moseying under here, and I didn't see them coming until it was too late, and they took me up, and I ended up not being able to turn up quite fast enough, and I ended up over early. So
Is it because the red boat there is not getting the wind that the boat above it's getting? Is that what's the rationale for that rule? I mean, maybe this is.
It's just a strategy.
No, but I'm saying.
Where the origin of Rule
Where-
11.
Yeah, and then maybe it's not the place to have this conversation, but I remember that it was always from the rules of the road and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And so that the whole concept was that you don't want to take the wind from another boat in normal cruising situations. This is a little different, but it sounds the same thing, that once they get underneath you, they've got less wind.
Yeah, but that's why they get the rights.
That's what I'm saying. So that is the same rule. It's the same rule that you use in cruising.
more or less, yeah. It's based upon a similar theory. So
Is that called hooking?
yes, yeah. It's when you get a hook on somebody, is when you
That's cool,
establish
right?
that overlap and start to
Yeah.
push them up in that sort of hook-like
Yeah, so-
format. So
Now, if you're the blue boat and you're trying desperately not to, like, either slow down and let that red one get out from under you or whatever, what would you do? Left your jib and sit there and let the other guy fly by and then tighten back up and keep going, or do you really have to get bumped all the way in?
it
You know, they bump
depends
you in,
what's going on around you on the starting line. So if you have a situation where there is, let's say that there's another boat right here. So let's say that there's another guy here. So if this guy comes in here and is now pushing you up, the only option you really have is to go head to wind and sit next to this guy, because you can't tack onto him. At that point, you tack onto port, you've lost your rights because you're now a port tack boat and this guy is still on starboard, right? So you can't go past head to wind. So at that point, you just sit there and luff. This guy will come up and take his place on the line.
And as soon as it clears you,
Then you can,
fall back
yeah.
off.
And so, especially on a crowded starting line, when that kind of thing happens, typically what you do is you usually, just because of the force of wind coming down, this guy will start to slowly float down this way. And then you can kind of dive a little bit, pick up some speed, come back up, head to wind, dive a little bit, pick up some speed. And then that way, when you start, you're not just parked head to wind, you have like a little bit of momentum going. So you can try to, if the other boat's floating away a little bit, you can try to like nose down a little bit and pick some speed up.
So it probably, how you handle it probably depends on how close you are to the start also, because if you have a couple minutes,
Yeah.
you might try to stall there and then like, give yourself time to dip
Yeah.
a couple times. But if you're, yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
But wouldn't this also be?
This is why I get nervous at the start.
But isn't this past the point of where you're sausaging, right? So you've gotten, like, that's happening just when you're supposed to be crossing the line.
Yeah, this is happening like probably about,
Yeah.
10 to
10
20
seconds.
seconds
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
you start. So you're
Yeah,
on
yeah.
final at that point.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that you can do is, let's say that this guy comes up here and parks in this position. You have, let's say, 10 seconds to go, and you still have some speed on, and if you have space here, you could dive below this guy and come up right underneath him and do the same thing to him if you wanted to. You just have to make sure that you have the time and speed to get all the way around this guy and still get a clean start. So it depends on the situation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And room at the end.
And room at the
Yeah.
end.
And we're looking at it as well. So, one more rule before we get to this end of the line. So rule 16, right, is that if you are tacking, a tacking boat has to keep clear of a boat that is going straight from the time that your boat passes head to wind, so as you have begun your tack and your sails are luffing, until you've come out of your tack and trimmed in on the other side, you have to keep clear of the boats that are going straight. So if you are encountering something on the race course where two boats are coming together, you know you're on a collision course, you want to make sure you make that tack and get out head and trimmed in before you come to a point where this person has to alter his course. So basically, if you, in the process of tacking, obstruct the guy going straight and he has to change course, you've fouled him, he can protest. So if you're tacking from the time that your sails are luffing until you are actually sailing on the other side, you are the keep clear boat. Okay, so with respect to windward, leeward rights, and whatever else at the mark, as I mentioned before, if somebody's coming in here, it's a very popular thing to start at the committee boat, especially if the right-hand side of the course is favored, if there's better breeze there, or if the wind direction is slightly off, that's going to give you a more advantageous angle, or if you have a skewed starting line where the committee boat is way closer to the windward mark than the pin is, people will try really hard to start at this boat end. So if you have somebody who's put themselves in the prime position of coming in and they're just going to sail right along the corner of the committee boat and start the race, if you would like that position, keep in mind that you are to windward of this guy, which means that you have no rights on the guy who got the prime spot already, and that guy can luff you out of there. So as you're coming in here, it's known as barging if you like force yourself in there and cause a collision or other sort of. If you are coming up here and you can't get into this corner, duck under and start elsewhere because you will lose that protest every single time. And you may damage the committee boat, and the committee boat hates that. So
It's not a good way to make friends.
Committee boats carry guns.
As a former committee boat owner over here.
Who has been in that situation?
Yes. So again, windward leeward applies there. So if you're trying to come in from above this guy and get in there and squeeze your way into a spot you can't fit, don't do it. Okay, so a specific set of rules.
Yeah, exactly. Except you got somebody giving you the hairy eyeball.
All right, so mark back here. So there is also Rule 18.
Mark.
And Rule 18 contemplates a 3 boat length imaginary circle. Don't you love these imaginary things that you can't
Yeah,
see
really.
on the water?
Yeah, it's great.
An imaginary circle around the mark with a radius of 3 boat lengths. And when you go into the 3 boat length circle, which is known as the zone, and there's a whole definitions section in here, and this definitions section will give you all kinds of useful terms such as the zone. So once you are in the zone, there are some special rules. So these boats are coming up now. As a reminder, this guy is your leeward boat, this is your windward boat. So as you come in, let's say that this guy is looking a little iffy whether or not he's going to make the mark. You as the windward boat can't just roll over the top of him and make him go out down here. You have to give him what's known as mark room, which means that you have to leave him enough space to actually round the mark without having a collision or touching the mark. And what they call in a seaman-like manner. So figure out what a seaman-like sailor might do. So basically the concept is that if this guy's going in, he's got to have room to round. You have to go around the outside of the pinwheel. This gets really exciting when you have 10 boats that are trying to go around at once and everybody's like coming around to the outside. It turns into a big mess. The other thing that applies here is that if a boat reaches the zone and is clear ahead, so these guys are going in like this. Let's say that this boat, as it's going along, is starting to slow down. This guy suddenly is going faster. If he establishes an overlap in here, he's still got to let this boat have room to round. So, the other thing to know about the zone is that if you are on opposite tacks coming into this, the boat that's coming in on port tack has to tack to go around the mark, but there's going to be a whole bunch of boats coming in on starboard. As you come in to do this tack, if you are this port tack boat, if you come in to do this tack, you cannot foul or cause any of these starboard tack boats coming in to change course. You have to let them do their thing. They're already established on starboard tack, so, more of a simple port starboard concept. If they're coming in on starboard, you can't force yourself in there. You can't force them up. You can just...
Can you go back to the one right before this one?
Mm-hmm.
When they were coming in, just real quick?
Yeah. So if you are coming in, so the rule is the clear astern boat gives the clear ahead boat mark room. So if you are coming in like this, let's say that you're approaching the zone, right? Blue is behind you. As you come in, if blue suddenly establishes himself on either this side of you or this side of you, he can't block you from rounding the mark. Basically, he has to allow you to still do your thing. He can't come in here and force you out. He can't come over you and force you down so that you can't round it. He has to let you round.
But how does he do that? The pin's stagnant. The pin's not going to move.
Right.
The other guy, the red boat, is the one that's that has the flexibility. The blue boat's kind of stuck.
Yeah, but
Well,
that's,
it
he's
can't
in
get
the
in his
zone.
way.
Once he's
So-
in the
Once
zone,
he's in the zone, right?
he's got.
Because that's tight once
he
it's
loses
3
that.
boat lengths.
The blue boat
Just don't
loses
get
its right.
So you have a couple of options. If you're the blue boat and you've come in here, there are two different things that you can do. First of all, if you've come underneath this guy, then you can just slow yourself a little bit, like ease your sails out, let this guy go around in front
Just
of you
to
and just
block.
fall in right behind. And then the other thing that you can do is if you're up here, you can just sail above him around, so that you guys kind of go around in a pinwheel. Or you could also do the same thing when you're above him, just let him go and kind of fall in behind him. But you
can't fall. If you're the blue one and you're going on the outside, you have to make sure that you don't crowd the red, because if he hits the mark, then you're
Yeah.
messing with him, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's you have to give them mark room, which is
Right.
just room to
I
get
just
around
remember
without
that.
being smushed into it.
And people yell, room.
Yeah, people will yell for mark room. The reason why nobody wants to hit the mark and why it is important that you let somebody get around without hitting it is that if you do hit the mark, that's a penalty and you have to do turns. Which brings me to what happens if you have committed a foul. So, if somebody has committed a foul upon you, you would yell protest, and you will have a red flag somewhere on the boat, and you fly the red flag and attach it to the boat somewhere. From there, it is incumbent upon, so sailing is a self-policing sport. You're expected that if you know that you committed a foul, that you should exonerate yourself. So, if you are the boat that has committed the foul, somebody has yelled protest, they have the red flag going. If you believe that they're right and you fouled them, however that may be, if they were on starboard, you were on port, you made them change course, or you were to windward and they were to leeward and you didn't get out of their way, whatever the case may be, if you believe that they're right and you did something wrong, it is on you to exonerate yourself. That means that you are probably going to be doing a 720, so 2 full turns. The sailing instructions for this series and most other series usually cuts that down to a 360. So basically you'll do 1 full circle, a tack and a jibe, and then you can keep sailing. The idea of doing that is basically whatever advantage that you gained by fouling that person, it gives that person time to get back ahead of you. And so if you believe that they're correct and you did foul them and you're guilty as charged, you do your turns. If you feel like this was a questionable call, you didn't actually foul them. Some people like to engage in soccer-like theatrics. If you have 2 boats that are coming towards each other And let's say that you're on a port starboard and you know that you're going to cross them and you're doing fine and you're going to cross them, but they at the last minute throw the wheel down, make this big exaggerated turn and go, oh my God, you were on port, I had to alter course, you fouled me, I protest. And you're like, you had a boat length, you were fine. You can go to a protest room with that. So if you don't want to do your turns because you believe that you are innocent, then you let them protest. At the end of the race, when they cross the finish line, they will announce to the race committee that they're protesting you. And then at the end of the race day, you go back over to the race committee office, which will be at Centerport Yacht Club, and you'll sit down in a room with some judges, and you will each plead your case. And they will make a decision based upon, you'll have to do like a little drawing of what happens. They'll give you a piece of paper to fill out, and you do a drawing on a grid of who was where. You each tell what it was that you saw. If you want, you can bring a witness if there's like a third-party boat. They will have like a little bit of a hearing, and they will either, if they agree with you that you are innocent, then the whole thing will be absolved. If instead they agree with the other boat that you were guilty, then they will give you a scoring penalty, which is usually a disqualification for that race. So, note to the wise when it comes to protesting. Typically in these things, you have to really, really want to protest in order to actually go to the room. Typically, people just kind of drop these at the end of the race because this is like very fun racing and it's not that serious. If you do have to go to the room, you pick the person on your crew that you think is the most well-versed in the rules and send that person to go in and be your advocate. That person will go over to Centerport Yacht Club and they have to wait longer to get their glass of wine or beer or whatever it is at the end of the race. So you have to really want to protest.
So nobody on the committee board, there's like nobody with binoculars checking things, they're to start and finish.
So they're just checking the start and finish. I always thought they were checking things out with, watching what's going on.
Yeah,
no, so actually in certain types of racing, in match racing in particular, they actually have little judge boats that follow you around the course, and there's a wing boat and an umpire behind you, so they can see you from two different angles and they'll know who had an overlap because the wing boat's watching that and the umpire is going through the rules and recording.
Because I was just thinking of something like the mark space. My gosh, that could be, you could really argue over that. I mean, how much is that? And then
yeah. So that's where the idea of like a seaman-like rounding, if you can figure the way that you would like your rounding to look, it doesn't mean that it has to be you don't have to give them room to do the most beautiful ballet of a rounding ever. They just have to be able to get around without hitting it and without hitting you, more or less. So these are the main rules. There are like a slew of other rules. So like I said, I would encourage you to take a look through. They're all pretty common sense. Like you said, a lot of them apply to the same things that you would find out on the water. Take a look through those. And in the event that we get into a situation out on the water, the way that I'm planning to have this all set up is that each boat will have at least one experienced person on board who in the beginning will be the skipper. And then after that, we may pass the helm off to other people and have that person be the tactician, as it were. But they'll help with the rules. And if for any reason there is, what I would like to do is that after each day sailing, when we come in, we'll sit down somewhere, grab a cocktail, and go over what happened. If anybody has questions like, hey, this thing happened and I don't understand why they protested me, or we went to set the Spinnaker and everything went all pear-shaped, what did we do wrong? We can sit down at the end of each day and talk through that and then kind of go through the learning process in a off-the-water environment where there aren't things going haywire and you actually have time to like ask questions. So I think, the only other thing that I wanted to go over was the idea of proper course. You may hear somebody when you're out on the race course yell proper course at you. The idea behind proper course, and again, if you look at the definitions in the racing rules, I will read you the proper course definition because again, it's very plain English and it makes a lot of sense. Proper course is a course that a boat would choose in order to sail the course and finish as soon as possible in the absence of other boats referred to in the rule using the term. So basically, if your proper course is your fastest way around the race course, meaning that if you're out here on the course, let's put together a starting line here. So let's say that you're sailing along, it's time to go for the windward mark. This guy tacks over, you go a little further, you tack. So if you're coming up to the mark, this guy, his proper course, his fastest way around the course would be to round this mark and start heading downwind. Meaning that he can't decide that he's going to, you're overlapped windward leeward. He can't take you up to the moon here and send you out to Eaton's Neck just because he feels like it. He has to sail his proper course. And so if you get into a situation where somebody, if you're being hailed proper course, it means that somebody feels like you're taking them out further. Now, that doesn't mean that just because somebody yells proper course at you, you have to give them what they want. If you feel that your proper course is, let's say that the wind has shifted, and it's now, the wind has gone from here, and so now the wind is over here, so upwind angle is more like this than like this. This is bringing you closer to the mark. You can go there if you want to. So you do have options. I mean, if your proper course isn't what the guy next to you thinks, well, maybe his tactician is garbage. Maybe you shouldn't listen to him. So there is wiggle room there, and that tends to be one of those things that gets futzy in a protest. Nobody is going to protest over that on the Thursday night series. But if you do hear that, that's just what the meaning of that is. So with that being said, I have completely bombarded you with a raft of stuff tonight. This will all make a lot more sense when we go out on the water, especially the stuff about the boat work. It's one thing to try to explain it on a whiteboard and completely another to actually see the equipment when I show you the Spinnaker pole and show you where it goes. It will all look so common sense and you'll be like, oh, I get it. But trying to tell you about it on here is definitely a little bit difficult. So,
yes. I have a question. When you were talking about getting into a situation where someone calls foul on you and you have to do a 360.
Mm-hmm.
Is there language in the rules that specifies how quickly you have to do it? Do you have to do it right there on the spot, or can you wait and do it at a more convenient time? If you were rounding windward and you just set your Spinnaker, I don't want to mess with a 360 then. I'd rather wait until a little later spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you have to do it as soon as reasonably practicable. So basically, the idea is that if you have rounded, so let's say that you foul somebody on the mark rounding, and you've just come around, but there's a boat here, and there's a boat here, and there's a boat here. You can't really turn right there. It wouldn't be safe to do that, and you'd foul a bunch more people trying to do it. And so basically, you would wait until this guy jives out and these guys go ahead, and then at that point you can do it. And if you need to take some time in order to allow clearing for safety, then that's perfectly okay. But if you've come around and fouled the guy in front of you, and he's gone, and you just don't feel like doing it, and you'd rather do it on the upwind, you can't do that. You have to do it right there where you have space to do it. So.
About how many boats are going to be racing at any given time?
I think the most we'll have is potentially 7. I'm not sure if Centerport has 3 or 4 ideals, but I figure it's probably going to be at most 6 of us, 3 from here, 3 from there.
Right.
And potentially as few as maybe 3. I guess it just depends how many boats we all field. They will send us with as few as 2. If we're the only ones to show up, they're not going to give us any points for making it around the course by ourselves. But I asked about that in frostbiting because I showed up one day. I was the only JY. I was like, does that mean I just win everything? Can I just go around the course? They were like, so I tried. But
and it's not a staggered start. I mean, for those 6 or 7 boats, you're crossing that start line at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, you may have more than one race in the night, right?
It'll depend on how quickly they're getting these done. These are short courses, so I figure they may give us 2.
Or do they do a triangle?
So the courses that they have, from what I saw in the sailing instructions, are just windward leewards. I didn't see any triangles in there, but I'll double check. As I was saying earlier, that I only got the sailing instructions earlier today because they were password protected on Centerport's website, so I had to have somebody send them over. I haven't gotten fully through them, but I am going to send them to the whole group. So
Is
that
it just
people-
us and Centerport?
Mhm. Yeah. I think it is technically tri-club, so in theory, if Bay Club had boats that they wanted to field, they could send them out, but I don't think they have any yet.
What happens if you don't want to set the Spinnaker and you sail wing and wing?
Yeah, just-
You can do that, and that is
You
if
don't
it's
have to set the Spinnaker, right?
yeah, you don't have to. If you want to go wing on wing, and there are days where if it's really windy, sometimes it's actually better to do that. Like you're not going to ever accelerate the boat past full speed, so if it's windy and you can hit full speed by going wing on wing, why bother? You're just asking for chaos and damage at that point, so you can do that, yeah. Or if you're just, regardless of the weather conditions, if you're just not feeling confident, you don't have to. I mean, it's totally an option. If you're not comfortable at that moment, or if the people on the boat don't feel like they're ready to do it, then skip that and you can sail downwind wing on wing instead. Or
One thing you can't do is you can't go Spinnaker in a chicken main race.
yeah, but
Oh, right.
these are Spinnaker courses. So.
Right.
So. I would also encourage people to try different positions on the boat. There will be something that becomes your favorite. I am either end of the boat, I'll drive, I'll do bow. I am not as comfortable as a trimmer. And I can do pit, I can do it. I don't love it, but I can do it. There's a friend of mine who doesn't want to know about doing anything other than pit. And some of my friends are just dedicated trimmers. It depends. You'll figure out what you like, but it does help to do all of the positions, no matter which one you like the best, because every time that you're doing another position, it kind of gives you this light bulb about where the pain points are for the other people. Like if you're the bow person and whoever is, doing the pit is never letting the halyard down fast enough and you're fighting against the kite, if you, send that pit person up onto the bow to see what it's like to fight with the kite, they're like, oh, now I get it. And all of a sudden your halyard's coming down at the pace it should. So that kind of stuff I'm hoping to rotate around so that people learn, the basics of every position, and then once you pick your favorite, we can kind of specialize from there. But it's good to learn them all.
Keep in mind also, we're probably going to have to supply some committee boat people.
Okay.
So on certain nights when we all can't sail, get you on a committee boat and help out a picket boat or whatever we. I don't know. Do we have access to the junior sailing boats? Are we going to be able to use any of that stuff?
Their
Or-
chase boats and stuff,
Yeah.
you mean? I don't know. I have not asked that.
We'll have to look into that because, again, I assume Centerport uses the green boat, whatever the name is.
Yeah, Lady Hawk. Yeah.
Lady Hawk.
Mhm.
Are they going to provide the committee boat every night, or?
Yeah, so they have been doing that so far. So it's always been their committee boat.
Mhm.
They may end up with a need for volunteers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead and
Which is cool too.
Yeah, actually, it's really good to do a race committee.
You learn a lot,
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah, especially just watching other people's starts and seeing what plays out strong and what's not so great, and just getting the chance to watch other boats go around the race course. It is really helpful to do that, and it's helpful to learn the sequences too, and just kind of get an idea for how all that works. It's race committee becomes more of an art form with the bigger boats, because then at that point you're dealing with horns and flags, and there's like a lot going on there. Yeah, so there's shapes and flags and all these things going on, all these visual signals that happen, and that becomes an art form in and of itself that a lot of people eventually end up doing, and it's you're worth your weight in gold once you learn how to do that. So it is cool stuff.
Shotgun.
Was that?
Yeah, you also get a gun.
What's his name? Gavin Matthews. What was his name? We had a guy. He had a big old Matthews, and he was doing committee boat. And they said, as a captain, they said, you can shoot the gun. So he said, great. So he said, there you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, gun. Boom. He's under the canopy.
Oh,
Boom! Blows a hole in the canopy. The thing's on fire now.
Oh my.
What is it?
At least it was his fault.
Lady
Yes.
Luck, wasn't it?
Lady Luck.
Yeah, Lady Luck. I'm trying to remember what was his name.
Yeah.
I can't recall.
Not so lucky.
Not so lucky.
Yeah, no, not so lucky.
Not so lucky.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Centerport has Ideal 18s also.
Yes.
It's the
Yes.
same
Yeah.
groups
Yeah.
It's not on that side.
Are they
And,
club boats or private?
They're club boats,
Oh,
yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
They had some pretty good, back when, they had some really good racers there.
Yeah, they still
They're a
do.
racing club.
Yeah, they still do. They have some really good people. And actually, depending on how things go, I don't know how many people they have signed up, but I'm going to be working with their event coordinator as well, so that if we end up with a situation where, let's say, they only have 5 people show up and they need to fill boats, if we have 14 people show up, then a few people can go out in the Centerport boats, and again, every no, not sabotage. But every different group that you sail with, again, you'll learn things from. So that kind of stuff is always good. If you're finding that you really are enjoying racing too, a lot of those people do big boat stuff on Wednesday nights and weekends and things like that. So you can find yourself an invitation to do some of the bigger boat stuff. And they are some of the nicest people. Like, I've been racing with a bunch of them from over there for years and years, and they're some of the nicest and most welcoming. So if you end up on a Centerport boat, you won't be disappointed.
Do we have J80s here?
No, Centerport has a couple of privately owned ones, but we don't have any here at the club.
I only ask because my daughter just signed up for, she's invited to be a Sea Scout and is
Okay.
racing J80s as her first
Nice.
racing experience on
Wow.
Wednesdays, which is
That's good.
hairy,
Yeah.
but it's fun. She's
Mhm.
having a good time.
Yeah, those are good boats. They're comfortable. They're well designed, so she'll have a good time with that. Definitely.
But I want her to try ideas.
Yeah, I mean, these are actually really fun to race, and as a future thing to keep in mind, I was contacted by the sailing director at Larchmont Yacht Club. They are hosting the Ideal 18 North Americans at the end of this season. And so he was hoping that we would send a boat or 3 over there to do that. So depending on how things go, we could go to the North American Championship. Hopefully we'll have new sails by then, so we'll see. But that would definitely be an experience because it's a fairly big fleet, and there's a lot to be learned by ending up in a big fleet like that and dealing with a very full starting line and these big mark roundings and stuff. It's very exciting, at times very humbling, and definitely a really good learning experience. So
You did the Milgis 24s
yeah.
in Miami. 80 boats on the starting line.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, as far as the eye could see.
It's a lot. It's definitely it's an experience. I was glad that I was not the person in charge of driving that one, but it was a lot. So
And then is it your intent to sail on Thursday, right after that? or-
yeah, if you guys are ready, we'll go out on Thursday and race. So
Wow.
trial by
Put the pressure on this.
fire. I'll make that first one optional. If people are feeling up to it, we'll get out there. If you are not feeling up to it right then and want like a weekend to practice, then that's also fine, and we can.
I'm sure we
Yeah.
can put 1 or 2 boats out there. We don't have to put all 3 out there.
Yeah, we don't have to put all 3 out.
Who cares if we lose?
Well, I mean that's the thing.
This is all fun stuff. This is all-
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna learn, the whole idea is we're gonna learn during the season.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
And
I
they'll scream
have.
at you,
There's
they'll
no
yell, and they'll
preseason.
scream back
Yeah.
at them, and just it's nothing.
I've learned more in match racing by getting my behind handed to me by people who are way better than me than I have in any other way, and I feel no shame about that. I mean, it's just part of the process. And yeah, there's no pressure to come up with any particular results. The idea is for people to go out there and have fun and enjoy the sport, and the rest of it will come with time. And if we do have somebody that does, if there's a boat that does particularly well, round of drinks on me, and we'll go from there. But yeah, this is informal enough that there's not like scoring, like there's no season scoring or series scoring or trophies or anything for this. It's just a
pretty
fun, yeah. It's like
Great way to start.
Yeah.
Great way to start.
yeah, definitely.
In the future.
So yeah, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.